And joining us now, Ananya Mukherjee-Reed, political science professor at York University and a frequent guest in these parts. And we're glad to welcome you to TVO this week.
Glad to be here.
Okay, we are going to get a much better idea and understanding of how India works by the time you and I are finished talking here. But just to set it in context, United States of America, 50 states, Canada, 10 provinces, 3 territories, India, sort of right in the middle, 28 states. We're going to bring a map up here and just sort of show the lay of the land. And then I want you to give us a sense of how the languages and cultures of India's 28 states sort of hang together.
How they hang together is, it's a difficult question, but let me just first give you an idea of the 28 states and the 7 union territories all together make India. And language is a very important basis on which the divisions were made. So there is about, 23 languages officially recognized in the Constitution, and 122 languages are counted in the census. And beyond that, there are dialects, 20 to 20,000, depending on how you count.
These
right?
are not all officially recognized.
These are not all officially recognized, but there is much debate about, the number of speakers, and there's actually many languages which are spoken by more than 10,000 people. And so there is language is a very major factor in diversity. Now, the states were set up on a linguistic basis, but that doesn't really tell you anything, because each of the states, which we call provinces here, we call states in India, they are administrative divisions, and we can even talk about regions like we do in Canada, which would be geographic divisions. But then each of these within them encompass a kind of linguistic, cultural, religious, ethnic, and any other category you can think of diversity, which is actually really undescribable.
So we have the West, we have Central Canada, we have the Maritimes. Do you break up the country that way?
We can, for purposes of understanding. So it would be fairly straightforward: north, south, east, and west, and the northeast, which is slightly separate region. And our national anthem, the Indian national anthem, which is actually written by the world's first non-European Nobel laureate, whose 150th birth anniversary we are also celebrating today. Not today, this year. So in that national anthem, it actually names all these different regions, again, to make the point that India is really all of this and not one, and there is really no dominance. But again, the divisions are geographic. There are some very big geographic markers, but beyond that, it is all extremely diverse. I can't quite give you sort of the Canadian landscape that you have for India.
Okay, well, let's do that. Humor me then. Let's do this. We're going to, for argument's sake, just break up the country into different geographic areas, just for the purposes of understanding it better. Let's start with the north. What do we need to know about the characteristics of northern India?
Well, first of all, the sort of dominant urban center there is Delhi, has traditionally been Delhi, which is the capital, but then there has been this tremendous growth of the newer cities like Chandigarh, from which a lot of the Canadian diaspora comes. And it also has the state of Punjab, which is industrially and agriculturally one of the most developed states, and also, again, the primary source of the Canadian diaspora. And around that, there is this question of, is it then the dominant region? There is a dominance there, and there is also, one language, Hindi, which is the official language, is spoken most often in that region. But again, within that region, we have extreme diversity, and other regions claim equal voice in the making of India.
Well, that's what I want to understand. And again, I don't want to push these comparisons to Canada too much, but again, I think it helps us understand. In the same way, Ontario is 40% of the GNP of Canada and a huge chunk of the population as well. Can you say the same about the northern area of India?
No, we can't, because the India's most populous state, which has a population of 200 million, is actually in that region, and but that's not, we can't quite identify that as the dominant region. There is political dominance, and there was much more when we had a centralized party. But then for a long time, we'd had a coalition government and national and local parties working together. So even that political dominance really is not there. And culturally, no region can claim the dominant Indian identity as the culture of India.
Okay. Next region, the West.
Right.
How is India's West, in some sense, the most visible part of the country to the rest of the world?
Right. Now, the South is also, but of course it has Mumbai, which is the financial center. And in the recent years, we've had this phenomenal growth of the Indian Stock Exchange, which is, you know, a revolution in of itself in the world of financial capital. Then we have Bollywood.
Bollywood is in this part of India.
Bollywood is in this, actually, Mumbai used to be Bombay, so Hollywood of Bombay is how the name Bollywood came to be.
Okay.
But many of us actually don't think this does justice to Indian cinema, but that's a different issue. But then the other interesting part, which applies to every region, but particularly this one, is that there is a huge then rural-urban divide. You would see this extremely modern urban centers like Mumbai, and then not very far from it is India's one of the largest agrarian regions, the cotton-growing region, which also, unfortunately, side by side, the prosperity of Mumbai also has the agrarian crisis, which is a very important marker of today's India. But so, again, Mumbai is extremely cosmopolitan. All of these places are very divided, very high degree of incoming migration in search of jobs. So diversity within itself, but there is a kind of, certainly the visible part is Mumbai and Bollywood.
Okay, when Thomas Friedman wrote his book, The World is Flat, which I suspect many of our viewers have read or certainly know about,
Right.
he was talking about the South. So
Right.
tell us about the South.
Right. The South is actually, again, many different languages, many different cultures, and very ancient classical cultures, but became visible to the West only because of this recent growth of Bangalore being one, which is what Tom Friedman writes about, the growth of outsourcing, high tech, and so on. And then now we increasingly hear about Hyderabad. And then we have around Chennai, which is another very old classical southern city around Chennai, a very important growth of the export sectors. So these, like cotton, textile, and so on. So these have brought visibility to the south. And then there is the state of Kerala, which has the highest best human development record in India, the only state in India which has a positive sex ratio, favoring women, and a very good record of development.
You've been there too, right? Lots
I've
of
been
times?
there too. I spent a lot of time in Kerala. But all over South, I've actually spent quite a bit of time in the last 2 years, and we see some really tremendous development in terms of high tech and infrastructure and so on. But also what fascinates me in the South is when I go there, I don't speak any of the Southern languages, right? And I meet people on a daily basis where we cannot communicate on any linguistic basis, but there is a tremendous, people have a tremendous ability to communicate. That has fascinated me, irrespective of language. And the other is ordinary people, everyday people who run different things in the city are extremely adept with technology. They are not the high-tech developers, but their ability at technology, at handling technology, is extremely fascinating.
Doesn't it, not everybody, but don't millions and millions of people speak English as a second language?
Well, they speak English, but then a lot of people don't, you know, and this is the part of India that has become invisible. Now when we think of India, we only think of the English-speaking India. And there is an English-speaking India. Most people will speak some words, but there is a huge India which doesn't speak English, but which communicates somehow extremely well.
Now, we haven't got to the part of India that you are from originally.
Right.
That's the east.
Right.
Where are you from there?
I am from the city of Calcutta, which is now called Kolkata, because we've all gone back to pronouncing the names in the Indian way. Okay. And that was the first sort of place where the colonizers came. And so it was a leader in the anti-colonial struggle, as well as very early development of education, industrial development, and so on. Then over the years, it had made some progress in some areas, particularly in distributive justice, but then it has fallen behind in industrial growth and so on. But it remains the leader in culture. Culture really is culture, and social movements, political movements is really what defines Calcutta and that area.
Not Bollywood, the other culture.
Not Bollywood, the other culture. And as I said, you know, the poet that I mentioned, Tagore, is from Bengal, but we think he's not a poet of Bengal, but of the world. then like the film festival that we are about to see, some of the best known directors in India have been from Bengal and still from Bengal. And so there is the cultural aspect of Bengal is very important, but that is not to say that we've not had our problems. There's been a whole plethora of problems that each of the regions, I mean, there is diversity, there is inequality, there is discrimination, but there is still a tremendous acknowledgement amongst common people of the importance of diversity.
Okay, one more region, the Northeast.
Right.
What do we know about the Northeast?
The Northeast is somewhat isolated, and it again has a totally different set of religious, cultural, and ethnic identity. Geographically, a much more harder geography. It's hilly, and politically, it has had a number of problems in its interaction with the central government and so on. But the isolation is isolation is not the only aspect of the Northeast. There is also several efforts going on to address the problems of the Northeast. It's not been done completely. It's a work in progress, but efforts are being made.
Is it linguistically and religiously different from all the other regions as well?
It is. Linguistically totally different. There's every some people say that every Indian is a linguistic minority. That yes, linguistically it's different, ethnically it's very different, and then in terms of religious identity, there is a lot more influence of Buddhism of different kinds. There's also a lot of indigenous communities, and indigenous communities have a different kind of religious framework, different kinds of religious framework, which are not counted amongst the 8 major religions.
How many languages do you speak?
In terms of Indian languages, only 2, which is
Hindi?
I speak Hindi and I speak my mother tongue, which is Bengali.
Bengali is your mother tongue.
But that's about all.
Which is, and you have English as well, and what else?
Nothing else.
So
I can, really nothing else. But in terms of Indian languages, it's only 2.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, now that we've had this conversation, I suspect people are asking themselves, thousands of different languages and thousands of different cultures and all of these regions and all of these states and 1.4 billion people?
Yeah.
How does this country stay together?
Right.
What unifies it?
So, couple of things. One is from the perspective of how people live, right? I feel that there is, amongst ordinary Indians, there is a real acceptance of pluralism, meaning that if anybody arrives there at anybody's doorstep and he or she is really different, there is a real acceptance of that person as a human being. And I felt that myself anywhere I've traveled, that there is a deep belief in pluralism. But this is also translated very much in our political framework. For example, when India set out, the constitution was created in 1950. Diversity was not seen as a problem. Diversity was seen as something that should be accommodated.
Do you know where that's from?
That's from us. That's from India. I think actually at that time, and I don't say this in jest, at that time I think there was in the 50s, in the colonized world, there was a lot of anxiety even in the colonizers' world that diversity somehow has to be assimilated. But India did not take the assimilation as path. And I think one of the things that really works for India is that Indians don't feel they have to make a choice between their cultural identity and their claims to citizenship as an Indian citizen. And I think this is what really holds it together. I can make a claim as a Bengali, which I am, but I can also make a claim equally as an Indian citizen. And when we've had cultural claims of, for example, the South has refused to accept Hindi as the dominant language, that is not the claim is not based on a claim for separatism, but a claim that there are other equivalent languages which must be held within the same framework. And by and large, not that there have not been problems, I don't want to romanticize it, but by and large, I think the fact that Indians don't feel they have to make this choice and that there is now a very strong consciousness of beyond culture and identity, that there are a set of democratic rights which every Indian citizen is entitled to. Well, that really holds it together.
You tell me if I'm pushing this comparison too far, but I think most Canadians think of themselves as being tolerant of diversity and welcoming of different kinds of people from all over the world. Do the countries have that in common, do you think? Do you feel it? You've lived in both places.
Yes. To a certain extent, yes. And to a certain extent, no. Because I would say in Canada, toleration, as you said, tolerance is for sure. But then I think the model of multiculturalism that Canada has gives the cultural rights, right? And there is a basic set of economic and social rights. But I don't know that somewhere people still feel that do we have to make a choice between our cultural identities and do we have to ascribe to a pan-Canadian identity to claim Canadian citizenship?
And you don't have to do that in India.
As when I lived in India as an Indian, I felt I didn't, and I think most people by and large don't. But this is only by and large. There are huge conflicts in India as well. I mean, I'm not denying them at all, but just what works on a broader level. Yeah.
When Indians leave there and come here, and many have, and many of them, of course, live within an hour of this studio.
Right.
Do you find that this notion of unity in diversity is something that translates in their lives here as well?
Yes and no. In fact, I want to say yes because I work with an organization called Panorama, which actually tries to promote exactly this, that we might have our different community identities, but there is a space for an Indian identity as well. So it is a work in progress, but it also depends on how the frameworks which we bring with us interacts with the framework of multiculturalism. And as I said, I don't think the relationship has been fully sorted out. It is still tenuous and very much a work in progress.
But I don't know, but my hunch is that when South Asians come here, the non-South Asian communities, everybody else, in other words, looks at them as a monolithic block of, okay, you're all South Asians from there.
Right.
You obviously don't, right?
No, we don't. We certainly don't. And we like to maintain the cultural identities that we have, but at the same time, we also, I think, also would like to be seen, not as a monolith, but not just as some of our cultural identities, but as, citizens in our own right.
Gotcha. Ananya, always good of you to visit us here at TVO tonight. And as I promised off the top, we sure know India way better now than we did 17 minutes ago.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.